I tell stories about the history and mysteries of Seneca Lake in upstate New York, and I have a very interesting one in this video where I talk about a connection with Abraham Lincoln's assassination and a bodyguard who lived out his life in Lodi, New York, which is right on Seneca Lake. Meet Mike Huff. Super interesting guy. Well, I ran into him at Wagner Winery one Friday night this past summer, and he started telling me about his great-grandfather, who was Lincoln's bodyguard. So listen to this story. I'm here with Mike Huff. Hi, Mike. So your full name is?
Michael Halsey Huff.
I understand you have a very historically significant great-grandfather. Is that true?
That is true. James Albert Huff. He is a survivor of 6 children and lived to an adulthood during the period of 32 to 1919, and he's a Civil War veteran.
When he was young, what did he do?
His trade, a farmer, obviously, back then. He also was a harness maker and a cabinet maker throughout different periods of his life.
And where is this?
In the township of Lodi.
Lodi, New York, which is right on Seneca Lake, basically, right?
That's correct, yep. Wine country.
How old would you say he was when he went into the Civil War?
He joined the Civil War in 1861. At that time, we had the New York Fireman Brigade and all that, and there wasn't that many regiments, so they created the 102nd New York Volunteer. And when he joined, and when they did their training and stuff, and his first battle was down at the Cedar Mountain, and that's where he got wounded and shot.
Where's the Cedar Mountain?
I believe in Virginia.
Okay, so that was one of the major key battles of the Civil War.
At the beginning of the Civil War, yes.
And I understand he was injured?
He was up on the line, and the Confederates was doing the charge, and they fired their rounds and just about took off the first front line as they stand.
Oh.
And people right and left of him was obviously shot, wounded, and killed. He yelled to his company commander, a lieutenant, I think, and he says, "I will not retreat from any damn secessionist." And he stood the line, he fired his weapon, he bent over and picked up the guy next to him, which I believe might have been dead, fired his weapon and continued. And the result of that, he re-rallied the line, and the battle continued, and I believe they won that side, but it was an awful bloody battle. So being wounded, they had a thing back then, they call it the reserve unit. And whatever your severity of your wounds, you would nurse you back together. And if you was able to get well enough to go back to your company,
they put you back out in the field to fight again.
Yeah, to fight again, correct.
But wasn't he considered a hero?
I imagine back then, I guess our family don't look at that way because we're a bunch of combat seasoned veterans throughout my whole family history, from the Revolutionary War to Vietnam to Saudi Arabia. So like my father says, you do your job, you do your duty, and that's it.
That's very honorable. I didn't realize that of your family line. And all these generations lived right here on Seneca Lake in Lodi?
My sister and I, probably in our family, stayed in the area. My other parts of my family has expanded out throughout the western states and stuff.
And your ancestors are buried in the local cemetery?
Yes, they are. James Albert's buried at West Lodi Cemetery.
So back to the battle. He was wounded. He got a lead pellet, or what do you call those?
Musket.
He got
a Confederate musket ball in his right leg, upper part, right leg above his knee. And as he recovered, the Gettysburg battle already took place. It was over. And Lincoln traveled to Gettysburg, obviously do the Gettysburg Address.
Okay, we're talking Abraham Lincoln.
That is correct.
So he was recovering from this wound, doing pretty good, considered a somewhat of a hero. And Abraham Lincoln did what?
Abraham Lincoln went with his delegation to Gettysburg to give the Gettysburg Address, which we all know how short it was, but how powerful it was also. My great-grandfather was stationed at the railroad station to do his bodyguard duty amongst other heroes of the Civil War. I believe they picked them because of their action in battle and combat.
So you're saying your great-grandfather was selected to be one of Lincoln's bodyguards?
That is correct. And after the assassination, he was also on the same guard detail with the train when Lincoln was traveling across country during the hottest time of the summer. And the family oral history is he every once in a while would complain on the formaldehyde.
And the smell of a decaying body in a train.
Yeah. And it was days and days and days they would travel.
I just watched a documentary. It was something like almost 2 weeks. They took the body all over for America to mourn.
That's Springfield, Illinois, where Lincoln ended up, I think.
So getting back to the assassination of Lincoln, I mean, one of the things everybody wants to know is why was the one bodyguard assigned to him not at the theater? Apparently he was drinking next door in the tavern, and I heard that John Wilkes Booth was also drinking in the same tavern as the bodyguard, who was not your great-grandfather, it was somebody else.
Yes.
Where was your great-grandfather during the assassination?
Well, this is the interesting twist. You know, through oral history and stuff, the family had Civil War letters along with the territory letters. Well, during the death of my grandmother, the family was battling over these letters and who should get them and who shouldn't get them and why they should get them. The family fight.
What letters?
The Civil War letters that he wrote home to his first wife. And so my uncle, Gene, he decided to settle the argument when everybody was fighting and bickering. He took the letters out and burned them.
Oh no. Oh no, a piece of American history burned up.
Yeah, so it's only by oral history, and one of my great aunts that was documenting them never got a chance to actually document, to rewrite them by hands because the paper was delicate. So it's gossip.
So what is the gossip? What was the story? Why was Lincoln left unguarded?
Apparently that James Albert was on post and got relieved by some lieutenant, and a corporal or somebody was supposed to relieve him at Ford's Theater.
Wait a minute. Is this the man that was supposed to be the single bodyguard with a chair outside the opera house?
It possibly could be.
You're saying he was relieved of duty, but that's not what, history and Google and Wikipedia say. They say he was drinking next door, like he left his post.
Well, too bad for that guy.
I'll say, and too bad for Lincoln and America too. But
Yeah.
Are you saying it's possible that he was actually dismissed, so he was left unguarded?
He was relieved of duty by an officer. That's kind of like our end of our story. And it would be nice if them letters stayed around, and that could have been a proof of documentation, because he did name the captain that came to relieve him.
Wow. Okay. This kind of changes the whole assassination, because there's rumors it could have been a conspiracy, not just John Wilkes Booth acting on his own, correct?
That is correct. That's how the history portrays everything with Booth.
But yeah, so as history unfolds, new information comes out that we didn't find out at first. Of course, back in those days, there wasn't a lot of accurate news reporting, very few photographs.
Right.
But the oral history of your family is that that bodyguard was relieved of his duty And so your great-grandfather, James Albert Huff, returned home to Lodi, and then he lived the rest of his life here. And what did he do?
Well, actually, his first wife and 2 sons went out to the Midwest. I think it was out in Wisconsin to settle out there because opportunity. And there was a plague out there. I can't remember which one it was.
They called it the Black Plague of the Midwest. They think it might have been cholera?
Cholera. I believe it may be cholera. Cholera, yeah.
Due to bad sanitation, I think.
Yes. And when his wife and I think a couple children passed, he moved back here where his family was, and he eventually remarried. And him and his father, Morgan Covert, would travel back and forth several times throughout their lives. But James Albert ended up being a rural post carrier, and we have a Remington pistol, used to be his belly gun, that he would carry with him doing the mail service, the mail route.
So, Mike, let me ask you, was there ever a photo of these bodyguards, of Lincoln's bodyguards?
Someplace there's a family member that has more photos than I, and I got a copy of the guard detail that was on the train detail, Bodyguard in Lincoln. And I believe it wasn't an act of Congress. Each man got the Medal of Honor for doing that duty. And I think in 1914, they had to return the Medal of Honor because it was not granted by Congress.
They had to return their medals of honor because it was found that Congress wasn't involved. So some technicality.
Yes.
Oh, that's a shame.
So, but as duty goes, my grandfather, great-grandfather, returned it, as far as I know of.
So his legacy is he had 7 sons and 1 daughter, and he was your great-grandfather.
That's correct.
And then you stayed in the same area, and he's buried just from a few miles from where we're sitting and talking right now in Lodi, correct?
Yeah. My father lived in the same house that he built right up to the death of my mother. Then we sold it. I think it was around 2006.
I see. Well, Mike, this is a very important part of American history that nobody's heard up until now. Well, Mike, thank you so much for sharing.
You're welcome.
So there you have it, some new information about Lincoln's assassination. So is it possible that what we're told about Lincoln's death maybe wasn't completely true? Maybe his bodyguard was relieved of his duties by superiors. Maybe John Wilkes Booth didn't act alone. Unfortunately, we'll never know, but we do have this last bit of history to report. Thanks for watching.